Well, please join me in Gassho and repeat the Nembutsu with me. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namandat, namandat, namandat. Good morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to see all of you here in your Halloween costumes, for those of you who chose to participate. I was a little worried that the shark was going to eat the incense when he came up here, but luckily he just chomped on the smoke. So it's so wonderful. It's so wonderful to see everyone in the Halloween spirit, even though it is a few days, or a little bit less than a week than Halloween itself. But this is a time where, especially for the kids, and I guess adults too, that we're able to dress up in costumes and go out trick-or-treating. Do you all still do trick-or-treating? Raise your hands. Who here does trick-or-treating? Okay, all right. Sadly, where we live here at the temple, I don't get any trick-or-treaters. I mean, it makes it easy not having to buy candy, but no kids come to that. We live in this. I guess if I lived in the apartment building, I'd get, trick-or-treaters if you live in an apartment building, but I'm not entirely sure. When you dress in a costume, it's so wonderful because I think we all ask ourselves, do I want to be scary this year? Do I want to be heroic this year? Or do I want to be funny this year, right? And as we get older, the reasons behind our, what we dress up as, get different. But I think for many of us, when we ask ourselves, what are we trying to emulate, or what are we trying to be when we get into costumes? We, I think, sometimes when we're younger, have an impulse. Like, I want to be this. I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a shark. I want to be a chicken, right? I want to be a minion, right? I want to be a fairy. Or I want to be a woodland sprite. You probably have seen something that makes you want to be that thing, that makes you aspirational. And sometimes you want to scare people too. Sometimes I don't see any real scary costumes in the Sangha this year, which is probably a good thing. We don't want to scare our kids too much, right? But I've seen some pretty scary costumes as well, like zombies and other like dark beings from dark video games and things like that. I'm certain, well, actually, no, you're all high schoolers now. I'm certain that some of you'll see some of those costumes at school and such. But, one of the things I really enjoy, and this is actually something that I was thinking about, especially when thinking about what to talk about during the Dharma school portion, is Batman. How many of you know who Batman is? I dressed as Batman one year. And then one of the greatest lessons I think that Batman taught me was to dress up as the thing that I'm afraid of. You probably all didn't know this, but Bruce Wayne, the alter ego of Batman, sorry, spoiler for those of you who don't know Batman, but Bruce Wayne, right, was actually afraid of bats. He was actually scared of them. And in fact, he was attacked by bats at one point in his childhood. And so bats really got him afraid. And so of course, Batman does his other thing where he fights crime and everything. But people wonder, like, why did you choose to be a bat? You could have been like a ninja. You could have been just like this dark shadow, right? Why did you want to dress up as a bat? To which Bruce Wayne responded, bats scare me, right? And so he became, he actually, in order to conquer the thing that he feared, he dressed up as it. Now, I think as we grow older, our fears become more complicated, right? We have many different types of adult fears, like fear of failing this, or fear of losing things, fear of a whole lot of things. But when we're kids, right, sometimes we are scared of the dark closet in the bedroom, right? The door that's slightly ajar, and the darkness that you can't see. If you're scared of that, my solution to that is watch Monsters Incorporated. Have you all seen Monsters Incorporated? Yes. I guarantee you, when you watch that movie, you will no longer be afraid of a dark closet. You might be afraid of things under the bed, right? So all of these things are, and full disclosure, were things that I was scared of as a kid. These are things that I was scared of as a child. How many of you sleep with the night light on? Be honest. Okay, one, all right. Now you, okay. Really, wow, that's impressive. But when I was a kid, right, when I was a little kid, I was like, I need to have a little night light on, right? And then my parents would leave it on, and then sometime during the night when I was fast asleep, my parents would sneak back into my room and turn the light off so I could sleep better, right? The things parents do for their children. But that's the thing, right? When we are afraid, it's usually because of things that we can't see. Usually, it's because of things we aren't able to see and things that we're not able to know. And then when we don't know, we create scary images from those things that we don't know, like the dark closet, like the things under the bed, or like things that go bump in the night. You know, yesterday could be pretty scary because there was a real gusty wind yesterday. And thankfully, that didn't happen at night. But sadly, I heard, for those of you who live in King County, that gale of a wind caused power outages for over 15,000 people. Now that could be definitely scary, where it's a fall day and things get dark a lot quicker, and then all of a sudden, the lights go out. And wouldn't that be scary? Especially like even if we're here in Temple, and then all of a sudden the lights go out, we immediately will probably start to panic. Thankfully, we have candles here that don't rely on electricity, but we'll probably all start taking out our cell phones, right? When it becomes dark, and when it becomes pitch black, the immediate first thing that we want to do is turn on the lights or find some source of light, so that way we can see things. This is, I think, the nature of our bombuness, or of our unenlightened kind of mind. Because the dark is scary, and because we aren't able to see things, we try to constantly look for the light. But I also think Halloween can provide us with a healthy sense of being scared. Like, what I mean by that is that we are able to dress up as scary monsters sometimes. We're able to look at scary things and face our fears head on, right? So for those of you who actually go trick-or-treating, I'd like to kind of share sort of a funny story during my childhood as trick-or-treating in my old neighborhood in Sacramento. There was always a few houses that the kids were kind of afraid to approach. And that's because they went all out in their Halloween decorations. But this house was also pretty notorious for the homeowners kind of hiding somewhere, right? And it's dark at the doorway, so you're even scared to approach the porch in the first place, because it's possible that the owner could yank open the door and scare you, or even jump out of the bushes and go boo, right, in a scary costume. And sometimes, one year it was really scary. Like, there were the owner bought like those kind of like Halloween statue, like mannequins, right, that stand still, and you didn't know if the person was alive or if they were, or if it was just a statue. And sure enough, one of them moves when you try to approach. Pretty scary, right? But at the same time, it gives us an opportunity to be brave. It gives us an opportunity to step forward despite knowing what might happen, right? Like, that's like going into a haunted house. For the Dharma School students, how many of you have walked through one of those haunted houses before? Yes? No? Okay, some of you haven't yet, right? And I'm not saying you have to go, right? I'm not saying you have to. But when we have Halloween, right, it does give us a good opportunity to actually confront the things that we're afraid of. We might be afraid of clowns. Ugh. Even some adults are afraid of clowns. But when we see the things that make us afraid, especially on Halloween, in a controlled environment, it gives us an opportunity to face that, right? And to realize that at the end of the day, there really is nothing to fear. Because in a controlled environment, we can feel that anxiety and that fear within ourselves, but then realize that we step out on the other side the next day, November 1st, without any harm to us. This is why I think Buddhism also kind of teaches us to look at ourselves as ourselves during Halloween. We're able to dress up as funny monsters or as other funny characters, but it also really provides us with a good sense of friendly fear, if I'm going to put a word to it. Friendly fear. So, for us here, particularly in the Pacific Northwest, it gets darker earlier these days, and the dark can be scary. But on the other side of things, right, the dark is a part of our lives as well. The dark is going to happen regardless. It turns night. And even though we can try to do all that we can to sometimes turn on lights, to look for lights, we can also do our best to stand firm and to laugh a little bit in the face of fear. So this is my Halloween message to all of our Dharma School students here today. The dark can be scary. Things that we can't see can be very scary. And if you see ghouls and goblins and monsters or yetis or other types of scary costumes, those can be scary too. But at the end of the day, it gives us an opportunity to be brave and to continue to walk forward and step forward and collect your candy. Please join me in Gassho and repeat the Nembutsu with me. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda Butsu. Namanda. Will you all please join me in Gassho as I recite the words of our founder, Master Shinran Shonin. The liberating wheel of light is without bound. Each person it touches, it is taught, is freed from attachments to being and non-being. So take refuge in Amida, the enlightenment of non-discrimination. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Good morning again, everyone. So once again, continuing off with the topic that I was discussing earlier for the Dharma School, Dharma Talk, the topic of fear, the topic of the darkness. This is actually, there's a lot of imagery of fear and darkness in Buddhism, in Buddhist lore. And in fact, when we go back to the story of Shakyamuni Buddha, one of the things that the Buddha feared, right, was the fear of impermanence, the fear of death, the fear of not knowing what happens after we die. This is due to the fact that Prince Siddhartha, before he became the Buddha, left the palace, a life of luxury, and had to see what was on the outside of this beautiful image that his father created for him. But when we think about Prince Siddhartha's journey into the journey to enlightenment, it is not an easy one. You could look at the picture here on the side wall here. There is a picture, the fifth picture from, I guess, your left is the picture of Prince Siddhartha's awakening to becoming the Buddha. And you'll notice surrounded by the Buddha are enchanting women, but also evil like demons, like demon-looking beings, right? And when we actually think about the one who tried to prevent Siddhartha from becoming enlightened in the first place, we have assigned a name to that being called Mara. Mara is the being who did all that he could to prevent Prince Siddhartha from becoming enlightened. Mara is often depicted as a demon-like being, kind of almost like devil, and I put that in quotation, but like a devil-looking like being, right? In our school of Buddhism, there is also many imageries of darkness and demons and things like that, because we share in this Buddhist lore, right? However, on the other hand, we also have images of Amida Buddha, right? So we actually have two diametrically opposed viewpoints, right? We have the darkness of our ignorance and our selfishness and greed, which is often depicted as demons or, really dark-looking beings. And then we have the image of Amida Buddha, the image of light and life and the infinite wisdom and compassion. So when we think about all of this imagery, it brings to mind our own existence as human beings, right? All of us are afraid of things. To say that we live without fear, or to say that we live without a sense of anxiety or a sense of dread sometimes, would be lying. I have a sense of fear. I have, every time, I call my brother every night because of his heart condition, because I'm scared to go sometimes a night without hearing my brother's voice. When I hear my brother's voice for one more night, it reassures me that my normal is still here. It reassures me that I can still count on him being here, right? And as sweet and as loving as you may find that, but there's also a selfishness to it as well. And this is because I realize that I am very much so still, I'm not saying I'm codependent because I can easily live my life, on a day-to-day basis, but that I still actually have this dreading fear because I nearly lost my brother twice to a congenital heart disease, right? That's a real fear that I have. And so, for all other parents in the room as well, you have, there is a fear and an anxiety as well. But the great thing I think that Jodo Shinshu teaches us, right, is that no matter how much fear and how much doubt and how much skepticism or sadness we may have, Amida Buddha's wisdom and compassion, the light that penetrates that, is everlasting and never goes out. This darkness sometimes, I think, is something that we forget that we have. We forget that we actually have this. And it's not to say that, and again, this isn't to say that we're bad people or that that we shouldn't have this darkness within us. It's that we are human beings and we are normal people. We are the average human being. And because of this, Amida Buddha sends us constant wisdom and compassion. This is the times that we experience those aha moments, the times that we actually have those fears settled, for even if it's just for a moment. This constantly continues to work for us. And this is why we place our hands together and say Namo Amida Butsu. But going back to the subject of Halloween, right? I wonder to myself sometimes, when Halloween sort of changed for me, growing up as an adult. It's so much fun to see the kids and even adults sometimes dress up as characters. And yes, I have an outfit that I'm going to be wearing later on to the party. But it's so wonderful to see all the children dress up. And it's because these children, many of them have a wonderful imagination. And we as adults sometimes, I think, have stifled that a little bit due to the realities that we live in. And it's the same thing, like when we talk about other holidays, right? We tell kids about Santa. We tell kids, and Valentine's Day for teenagers in high school who think they know what real love is, right? One of my favorite lines comes from the Valentine's Day movie where Taylor Swift is kissing her high school boyfriend in that, and the news reporter who's reporting on Valentine's Day said something like, oh, there you have it, young folks, young love, full of hope, full of energy, totally ignorant of reality. But But right, going back to the subject of Halloween, we see a lot of times these children actually dress up in these very, very creative costumes, or actual, things that they want to be, like a shark, or like a fairy, or like Minnie Mouse, right? They actually have the courage to express themselves in a way that we, as we grow older as adults, sort of stifle a little bit. Maybe we allow a little bit out during Halloween, because we realize that's the acceptable day to dress up as something else. But one of the things that I want to bring our attention to is this sense of fear and dread, right? The sense of darkness, the sense of fear. Another thing that we're very much afraid of is looking out of the ordinary sometimes. We're also afraid of appearing unconventional. Sometimes we're not, and again, there's a time and a place, because sometimes if we want to be unconventional just to throw it in another person's face, that's not, that's actually about the other person, not about yourself, right? But that being said, if we continue to stifle ourselves because of the fear of appearing, kind of weird or out of the ordinary, that in itself is a type of mist, a type of darkness that we all continue to live with. When I think about this subject of Halloween and fear, right, I think of the things that I'm most afraid of today. I think of the things that I'm most afraid of. It's actually no secret now that, as you all know, Reverend Cindy and I are expecting, and we are expecting a baby boy this coming March. With this in mind, though, right, when we go to the doctor's appointments, there is a little bit of anxiety there. There's a little bit of fear. Why? I think we all sometimes fear going to the doctor. We kind of don't want to go to the doctor because we don't want to hear what's wrong with us, right? Sometimes we want to continuously be blissfully ignorant. But if we have a really good doctor, just like the Buddha was, they're able to deliver us news that may not be so good to hear in a very compassionate and skilled manner, right? Not to just say, right, this is bad or something, right? But thankfully, Reverend Cindy and I, in all of our appointments, the doctors have informed us that everything seems fine. And that actually, makes me very much feel settled. And when the doctor says that, right, there is this wash of settlement, of like, coming over the anxiety. This is also the type of feeling that I think in a spiritual crisis sometimes, or in times of when the world is not feeling so right with us, that we can feel when we come to temple, when we hear the Nembutsu and say Namo Amida Butsu. This is the type of relief and relishing that Amida Buddha gives us on a daily basis. This is why I actually talked about this is why I actually quoted this wasan this morning. The liberating wheel of light is without bound. Each person it touches, it is taught, is freed from attachments to being and non-being. So take refuge in Amida, the enlightenment of non-discrimination. Right? All of us have different contexts and different paths that we come from. And all of us have different fears, different things that we desire, and different anxieties that kind of drive us day to day. And no matter what they are, the Buddha still gives us wisdom and compassion. We are constantly afraid of the unknown. We are constantly afraid of what might happen. We are constantly afraid sometimes of the darkness within ourselves, the darkness in other people, and sometimes the harshness of the world. And yet at the same time, we are continuously reminded to wake up and continuously reminded that there still is a loving force called the working of Amida Buddha's wisdom and compassion that works without stop for our benefits alone. And in that, we can take great comfort. In the time of Halloween, it is great to celebrate it, have fun, dress up in costumes, and confront our fears sometimes, right? Like seeing images of the Grim Reaper or some other image that frightens us. But it is also, when we think about it, manifestations of the things that we actually fear in life, like the fear of the unknown, the fear of what may happen tomorrow, the fear of whether or not my child would be born healthy, whether all of these things. And with this in mind, right, with all of these fears and anxieties swirling around in my head, it is wonderful that I am able to stop and pause and collectively turn my attention towards Amida Buddha and remember that there is wisdom and compassion working for my benefit, for me, for all of us. And in this, I am eternally grateful. And in this, I constantly say, Namo Amida Butsu. So as we go back out into the Halloween sort of atmosphere, go ahead and look at these images that sometimes may stir fear, but then realize that they are manifestations of the things that we actually are afraid of. Please join me in Gassho. The liberating wheel of light is without bound. Each person it touches, it is taught, is freed from attachments to being and non-being. So take refuge in Amida, the enlightenment of non-discrimination. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Naman.